Former FBI Director James Comey may be indicted soon. Sources tell CNN that President Trump's Justice Department is close to deciding on whether to charge Comey with lying to Congress. The testimony in question happened on September 30th, 2020, when Comey appeared before Congress to answer questions about his handling of the investigation into Russia's meddling in the 2016 election. You see him there. This was during COVID, of course, so he's doing it from home or from work. Under the law, prosecutors only have 5 years to the day to bring such a charge. If a grand jury does approve the case in the coming days, this would be one of the highest profile indictments in President Trump's second term. And this comes out.
Bueno, señores, resulta que Donald Trump está jugando a mover las fichas dentro del sistema judicial. Todo esto nos apunta a que estará utilizando la Fiscalía Federal como si fuera su oficina privada de venganzas. Acaba de salir a la luz que presionó a la fiscal general Pam Bondi para que nombrara como fiscal a Lindsay Heligan. Hablamos de una abogada prácticamente sin experiencia, pero que bueno, al parecer le cae muy bien a Trump. El objetivo real de todo esto, convertirla en la fiscal del Distrito Este de Virginia. Un puesto clave, señores, porque adivinen. Ahí vive nada más y nada menos que James Comey, el exdirector del FBI. Veamos esto.
What are prosecutors doing right now before they run out of time?
Well, to the best of our knowledge, they are getting ready to present a case to a federal grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia. So that's part of the federal court system in Virginia, where a lot has gone down in the past few days. What we do know about this is the contours of what has to happen between now and Tuesday. So we know that the prosecutors are looking at the possibility that James Comey lied to Congress. That's according to sources that Evan and I have. And we also know that that possible perjury charge, there's a deadline to bring it, because in the federal court system, you have 5 years to bring a charge. And that testimony Comey gave, it was on September 30th of 2020. September 30th, that's next Tuesday, and grand juries don't sit every day. What day will the Justice Department be able to go before a secret grand jury in one of the federal courthouses in the Eastern District of Virginia? Today's a possibility. Tomorrow, Monday, not a lot of time, and they will have to convince those grand jurors, between 14 and 22 people, to vote yes to indict Comey. We know that there have also been several different investigations around Jim Comey over the years after he was the FBI director. A lot of scrutiny there. He's the person that Donald Trump was posting on social media about over the weekend, saying no talk, all action, no talk, justice must be served, mentioning what about Comey. This situation, we don't know the exact details of what this indictment will say, but we are waiting to see exactly what emerges out of the federal.
Pues muy bien, seguramente se están preguntando por qué es que es tan importante este movimiento. ¿Por qué Donald Trump quiere que esta abogada, Heligan, lo acuse a James Comey antes del próximo martes? Justo cuando expira el plazo de prescripción de 5 años, por supuestamente mentirle al Congreso. O sea, todo esto está calculado al milímetro para que pueda alcanzar a presentarse los cargos antes de que se acabe el tiempo. Y es que aquí empieza lo turbio, amigos, porque este fiscal que estaba antes, no sé si lo recuerdan, hasta hace una semana, Eric Seibert, el cual no solo fue despedido, sino que muchos creen que él realmente renunció porque se negó a cumplir las órdenes de Trump. Prácticamente las órdenes eran inventarse cargos falsos contra sus rivales políticos. Y no solamente el tema de James Comey, ¿no? Sino que ahí entra también la fiscal Letitia James de Nueva York. Pues bueno, amigos, imagínense esto. Lo sacaron simplemente porque dijo no a un plan ilegal. Si es que no lo vieron esto, recuerden con esta noticia.
There's more breaking news tonight. The U.S. attorney under heavy pressure from President Trump to charge a New York State official the president considers a political enemy is stepping down. Earlier today, the president said he wanted to get rid of Eric Siebert, head of the Eastern District of Virginia. That's Siebert there. The president has been demanding that he charge New York Attorney General Letitia James with mortgage fraud. Siebert's office does not have enough evidence, they say, to bring an indictment. The president is angry with Siebert because or with Letitia James because she won a business fraud case against him and his company.
Entonces, ¿qué hace Trump? Simple, lo reemplaza con alguien totalmente dócil. Alguien que esté dispuesto a obedecer sin cuestionar. Y ahí tenemos a Lindsey Graham. Para colmo, pues bueno, como les dije, no tiene experiencia como fiscal, su historial viene prácticamente de casos de seguros en Florida y lo único que le acercó a Trump fue que lo defendió en algunos asuntos relacionados con Mar-a-Lago. Pero claro, a Trump le gusta simplemente tener a su lado a la gente leal, aunque no tengan ni la menor idea de lo que van a hacer. Bueno, señores, ¿cuál es la primera misión que Trump le da? Nada menos que ir tras James Comey. Si lo recordamos, en el año 2016 prácticamente él hundió la campaña de Hillary Clinton al reabrir este caso de los correos electrónicos justo antes de las elecciones. Ese movimiento, señores, fue el que le dio este empujón enorme a Trump en su camino a la Casa Blanca, su primer mandato. Pero claro, ¿qué es lo que sucedió después? Trump nunca lo perdonó porque después James Comey fue el que formó esta investigación sobre la injerencia rusa y la posible colusión de su campaña con Moscú. Y bueno, ya sabemos, ¿no? Trump tiene una lista negra. Y sin duda, James Comey siempre estuvo ahí.
The FBI has in its possession in August 2016 information from the CIA confirming what Mr. Page said, that he in fact was assisting the CIA, which explained the contacts. That was never given to the court. Should they have been informed of that? Because that's exculpatory to Mr. Page.
I believe Mr. Horowitz found that they should have at least considered informing the court.
You're the director of the FBI. Would you wish that had been done if you had known about it?
I'm sorry, Senator, that what had been done?
That you had informed the court that Mr. Page was in fact working with the CIA, and that explains these contacts. Do you think, out of a sense of fairness, the court should have been informed of that fact?
Again, I don't agree with your preamble. I don't think the record established that he was working with the CIA. I think Horowitz found he was a contact, which means
we've got the email from the CIA confirming that he was a source for the CIA. Are you aware of the fact that that email later on was doctored?
Again, I don't accept what you said. I don't think the record establishes he was a source for the CIA. I am aware from the Horowitz
Why is
report.
Mr. Kleinsmith facing criminal indictment?
I only know what I've read in the public record, that he was accused of changing.
You're the director of the FBI. You didn't know that your own agency had information from the CIA verifying what Mr. Page told you, that these contacts had a basis, in fact, because he was working with the CIA. Did you know that Mr. Kleinsmith doctored the email for it to read that there was no association between Page and the CIA, that he changed there was to there was not? How do you feel about that?
I know nothing about Mr. Kleinsmith other than what I've read in the public
Well, how do you
record.
feel in general about an FBI lawyer doctoring information exculpatory to somebody being surveilled? September the 7th, 2016, the U.S. intelligence officials forwarded an investigative referral of FBI to FBI Director James Comey and Assistant Director of Counterintelligence Peter Strzok regarding U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton's approval of a plan concerning U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump and Russian hackers hampering U.S. elections as a means of distracting the public from her use of a private email server. Did you know there is no Russian consulate in Miami? And the dossier mentions that there was one. Shouldn't the court have been told that part of the dossier is not reliable? Do you also know that Michael Cohen's adventures in Prague never happened? The dossier asserts that Michael Cohen went to Prague on some venture for Trump in Russia, and it never happened. And they know it never happened. They had information from a foreign government saying it's not true, and they never told the court. They never corrected all the misinformation in the dossier. It was used over and over again, and they never told the court about how unreliable it was.
Ahora bien, como les dije, no nos olvidemos, James Comey fue quien, en plena recta final de la campaña 2016, anunció públicamente, ¿no?, que reabría esta investigación contra Hillary Clinton. Y ese, señores, fue un golpe brutal. Es más, muchos lo consideraron como el golpe decisivo para que Trump haya ganado. Y bueno, sin embargo, en vez de agradecerle, Trump lo convirtió en su enemigo número uno.
Good morning. I'm here to give you an update on the FBI's investigation of Secretary Clinton's use of a personal email system during her time as Secretary of State. After a tremendous amount of work over the last year, the FBI is completing its investigation and referring the matter to the Department of Justice for a prosecutive decision. What I want to do today is three things. I want to tell you what we did.
Es más, recordemos cuando Trump públicamente pidió ayuda a Rusia. O sea, básicamente rogándole que filtraran los correos de Hillary Clinton. O sea, sin vergüenza, lo dijo así, en plena campaña. Vemos ese momento.
That a person in our government, Katie, would delete or get rid of 33,000 emails. That gives me a big problem. After she gets a subpoena, she gets subpoenaed and she gets rid of 33,000 emails. That gives me a problem. Now, if Russia or China or any other country has those emails, I mean, to be honest with you, I'd love to see them. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Entonces, señores, ¿qué tenemos? Tenemos al presidente de los Estados Unidos manipulando en tiempo real las instituciones solo para seguir cobrándose venganza. Un fiscal de carrera como Eric Saber, el cual tuvo que renunciar por negarse a inventarse casos. Y ahora tenemos a una abogada inexperta colocada a dedo y lista para cumplir con los caprichos del trumpismo. En esta ocasión, se los aseguro, va a ser perseguir a James Comey, a Letitia James, yo creo que irá hasta contra Adam Schiff. Bueno, pues todo esto nos huele, ¿no? La persecución política descarada, señores, y lo peor es que todo está quedando documentado. Los propios abogados defensores ya están utilizando este tipo de maniobras como las pruebas de que el sistema está manipulado. Y bueno, Trump está dejando en bandeja de plata la evidencia de que sus acusaciones son puras vendetas personales. Ahora bien, amigos, lo que está pasando en Washington, D.C., señores, es sinceramente perturbador. El país está al borde de este nuevo cierre del gobierno. Y mientras tanto, pues Trump y los republicanos siguen jugando con la salud de millones de personas como si fuesen esta ficha de negociación. La gran pregunta que muchos se están haciendo en este momento: ¿de verdad estarán dispuestos a sacrificar hospitales, trabajadores, pacientes, solo para mantener a Trump contento? Los demócratas decidieron plantarse cara. Están tratando de obligar al Partido Republicano a que atiendan la crisis de salud, en lugar de seguir pateando el problema. Y ojo, que no estamos hablando de un debate ideológico, amigos. No es algo cualquiera. Es un tema que literalmente puede costar la vida de mucha gente si es que no se resuelve. Pero bueno, escuchemos de qué trata esta noticia.
Joining us now is David Drucker, senior writer at The Dispatch and an MSNBC contributor. Basil Smikle is former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party and an MSNBC analyst. So 8 words, David: cancel the cuts, lower the costs, save health care. Is that the slogan that's going to give Democrats an advantage over Trump and the Republicans, because this fight is looking to get messy?
Yeah, that's doubtful. Americans don't like government shutdowns. They think they're an illegitimate form of political combat. And all the messaging in the world usually doesn't solve for that. You know, I'd point you back to 2013 with the Republican-instigated Obamacare shutdown, where they were trying to defund the Affordable Care Act, which at the time was rather unpopular. In fact, it was extremely unpopular. But Americans still didn't like the idea of using the government, funding for the government, and keeping the lights on as leverage for Democrats agreeing to push off one of their signature priorities that had passed through the legislative process. Americans just don't tend to understand why you can't fight for your priorities, propose legislation, and negotiate while keeping the government up and running.
So, Basil, look, YouGov polls, both in 2024 and this year, 2025, found a majority of Americans feel the Democratic Party does a better job of handling health care. We know people want their health care. They like their health care. Having said that, is there a risk in this?
No, I agree with David. Most Americans don't want a or don't like the idea of a shutdown, and a lot of this depends on the Democrats' ability to message it properly. But if you're going to pick this fight, I do think healthcare is the fight that the hill that you die on. And from this point of view, when you look at what's coming from Washington right now, the RFK Jr. has talked about changes in the way we think about autism, changes in the way we think about vaccines and administer vaccines. There's a lot of policy confusion around where to go next. When you
Can I take Tylenol?
Can I take Tylenol? When you couple that with the cuts that are coming from the administration with respect to Medicaid, changes in the Affordable Care Act, I think this is an issue that crosses party lines. So if you're going to fight this fight, I think healthcare is what you choose.
So, David, talking to Nicole Wallace, Jeffries also framed this battle as a moral imperative. Here that is.
We're not going to simply bend the knee to Donald Trump's will when he's gutting health care for everyday Americans and actively hurting people. That's immoral, and it's not something for us to participate in.
He lays out that this is happening in real time, that in California, at least 2 rural hospitals could soon shut down, with more of them at risk. In Boston, a nonprofit medical service provider for the homeless is laying off 25 workers. So is that the real threat here for Republicans if this stuff starts to unfold, I guess, simultaneously? Or how do Republicans respond if stuff like that starts happening?
Well, look, there are 2 different issues here, right? I mean, there are vulnerabilities that Republicans face on the issue of health care, and vulnerabilities that are going to come out of the, what is officially known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that reconciliation package that is going to impact how Americans receive health care and what they pay for it. That's the sort of thing that I think Democrats can fight and win on in the context of the 2026 midterm elections, at least, as things are framed and as things are framed now, and what we think is going to happen from a policy perspective over the next year plus. The question is whether or not shutting down the government is the right way to win on that issue politically. Because I'm not passing judgment here on what Democrats, feel is the moral thing to do. But if this unfolds like basically every other shutdown that we have seen going back to the late 90s, the party or president that instigates the shutdown as a means to extract a policy achievement ends up losing that debate with the American public. And then they end up folding. So if you're not going to if you're going to frame this as not bending the knee to President Trump, and that's a message Democrats want to hear, and I totally understand that, I don't know what they're going to say in 2 to 4 to 6 weeks from now when they essentially bend the knee to Trump, because the Republicans are on the right side of the shutdown argument, even if they're on the wrong side of the health care argument.
Well, I guess the question is, if there's a shutdown, Basil, and whoever gets blamed, does it have legs? It's different now. We are in a different environment because so many things happen so quickly. But if there's a shutdown, if we see something in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, does it have the potential to impact the midterms, or is that just so far away?
Yeah, 1,000 things can happen between now and the midterms. But to the earlier points, as I said before, this really does depend on a Democrat's ability to message this properly. They're going to have a machine that goes out into these rural communities and really talk to voters about why this was actually necessary. Because
are they ready now? Are they ready to do that?
I hope so. To be honest with you, that's my concern. No, I didn't make it very definitive. No, that is my ultimate concern, because in the past, and David's right, in the past, and I think even Chuck Schumer has talked about this, they want to be able to make a stand, but they are concerned about that Democratic machine, that messaging machine, to be able to go out and actually talk to voters. I do feel we are in a very different moment. I mean, I'm going to Chemung County, New York tomorrow, to a county in upstate New York that's had 50 years of Republican county executives, because they want to be able to talk to people about, what do we say to voters? What do we say to our neighbors? So if the Democrats are going to be that granular, that grassroots, and really go into these rural communities, I think it can work. But remember, with a shutdown, potentially people are not going to get paid. So when you add that to the other layer of economic concern that voters have, that's why it's not recommended that we go down this path. But if you're going to make a stand, I think talking about healthcare is the stand to make.
Yeah, and let's not forget, federal workers are not largely in Washington, D.C., as some people may think. They're all over the country. So since you brought up Chuck Schumer, let me bring up Democrats putting not just the emphasis on health care, but Schumer, who was on Morning Joe today, says there has to be this pressure that's being felt over rising costs overall. Here's what he said.
The view of Trump is declining because costs are going up, not just healthcare costs. Your energy costs are going to go up because of what was in that BBB. The tariffs, they're killing people. I just had one of my colleagues out in Iowa. All the farmers could talk about was how the tariffs were killing them. So people are getting really upset with Donald Trump.
So I know we say this all the time, David. We know it's all about the economy, but what legs does that have versus a government shutdown, if it happens or doesn't happen, ultimately, as we're all looking ahead to the midterms and who's going to control the House and the Senate, this overall big picture of prices?
Yeah, look, I mean, affordability is the number one issue voters care about. And in 2022 and 2024, we talked a lot about inflation, and it really has morphed now into this overall concern, even from voters firmly in the middle class and on the upper fringes of the middle class, that life in general is either unaffordable or much harder to afford comprehensively, holistically. So it's not just about grocery prices or what you're paying at the gas pump. Every time, every election cycle that comes around, I talk to Democratic strategists, Republican strategists, and usually they'll look at a president's vulnerability, whether it's their president, the president of their party, or the opposing party, and they'll talk about the need to put together a plan, an alternative to offer voters, and then you hammer the opposing president and his party over the head with their vulnerabilities, and then you tell voters, and this is what we're going to do. A government shutdown is not necessarily how you accomplish that, but there is a huge opening here for Democrats. What they're going to need to do if they're going to be as successful as possible, and we can look back on past midterm elections and see this, is not just point out the president's flaws, but then explain to voters what you would do if you were given the power to do something. Explain what you would do if you had the power to negotiate with the president in a real way over government funding and other policies, because you would control at least one branch of government.
Es que, señores, aquí es donde yo no me canso de repetir lo mismo. Esto no es una negociación normal, no es un tira y afloja de presupuestos. Estamos hablando de hospitales que están en zonas rurales que podrían cerrar en cuestión de semanas. Trabajadores del área de salud que ya están perdiendo sus empleos. Comunidades enteras que van a quedarse sin el acceso a servicios médicos básicos. Y cuando los demócratas llaman a esto un imperativo moral, tienen toda la razón. ¿Por qué? Porque ¿qué clase de liderazgo es ese que acepta que la gente sufra? Que la gente hasta muera, solo para mantener una narrativa política. Yo sé que algunos dirán que ambos partidos son culpables cuando existe el cierre de gobierno. Y es cierto que en el pasado la gente, ha solido culpar el empuje más fuerte, ¿no?, hacia el abismo. Pero esta vez la diferencia es clara, amigos. Los republicanos están defendiendo los recortes y Trump está presionando para que se cumpla su voluntad. Y mientras, del otro lado, los demócratas les toca tratar de proteger algo tan elemental como lo es el derecho a la salud. ¿Saben qué es lo más grave? Que Trump no ve esto como un problema real. No, señores, para él la crisis sanitaria es un instrumento. ¿Solo para qué? Para polarizar, para dividir, para poder presentarse como el tipo duro, el que no cede. Y la realidad es que detrás de esa postura veremos cientos de familias arruinadas por los costos médicos, granjas hundidas por las tarifas, trabajadores federales en todo el país que podrían dejar de cobrar su sueldo, y esos señores en cuestión de días. Pero bueno, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que los demócratas están haciendo bien en enfrentarse a Trump en este terreno? ¿O piensan que el riesgo de un cierre del gobierno es demasiado alto? Los leo en los comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido y suscríbete a nuestro canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.